back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. Now, last year, I was invited to a press day in Paris for a company called Thales, which is a French international company investing in digital and deep tech innovations to build a future that we can all trust, which, let's face it, is vital to the development of our societies. So today I've invited Amanda Widdowson onto the podcast, and she is the head of human factors at the company. And if you've ever seen those lazy headlines about people are the weakest link in cybersecurity and gave out a big sigh, you're in for a treat today, because we're going to be talking about blame culture, why we need to stop blaming people for poor security practices, and ensure people consider human factors when designing any new tech or new policy in business. For example, if we see vulnerabilities in human behaviour, why are we not making changes? And why companies need to fit procedures around the people rather than trying to change people. A quick few questions for you all. Does online privacy or lack of it concern you? And do you ever feel like your online privacy has been invaded? Well, after 2,300 podcast interviews on here, there are so many areas that I'm now aware of, such as the fact that my internet service provider literally knows everything that I do online. And incognito mode in a web browser doesn't offer as much protection as many think. But think about this. Would you find the prospect of handing over your laptop or phone to a complete stranger, or even a friend for that matter, to look at your browsing history to be the stuff of nightmares? And yet, someone out there knows absolutely everything you do online, every click, whether you like it or not. So if you want to stop internet service providers from always looking over your shoulder and profiting from your data, you need something like Private Internet Access, which is the world's most transparent VPN provider. They have over 30 million downloads. PIA has servers in 84 countries and in all 50 states. And it's the perfect software for staying private online because it hides your IP address and encrypts your internet connection. And Private Internet Access is really easy to use. There are apps available for all operating systems, and one subscription can protect up to 10 devices at once. And I'll be honest, as a daily tech podcaster, keeping my life private is very important to me. And after thousands of interviews talking about security issues on here, I'm more determined than ever to keep snoopers out of my digital life. So if you want to enjoy all the benefits of Private Internet Access, now's a great time to subscribe. Simply head to piavpn.com/techtalksdaily and get an 83% discount. Seriously, 83%, which works out at just $2.03 a month. And you also get 4 months completely free. But to activate this offer, you must go to piavpn.com/techtalksdaily for a truly private digital life. One last time, piavpn.com/techtalksdaily. So buckle up and hold on tight, because today I'm going to beam your ears all the way to the UK, where you can join me and Amanda in a conversation about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Amanda. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, I'm the head of human factors and user experience at Thales UK. Also, I'm a trustee and a former president of the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors. So human factors, for those of you who don't know, we really use psychology and physiology to understand people's mental and physical strengths and limitations so that we can make sure that the equipment and tech is designed around them.
And it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. And it's a bit of a tradition we have on here. And I always like to take my guests back in time to find out how you got to there or how you got to your current role. So can I ask you share your origin story and where your passion for tech came from, or just a moment that would put you on the path you're on today?
I mean, I think for me, it was really about, I guess, getting annoyed with stuff that wasn't designed around people. So, we used to have the save button used to be next to the delete button. I mean, what's that about? And we used to have to go to a menu called start in order to shut down our computer. But I think for me, probably the first experience was when I was learning to drive. And my instructor was teaching me to parallel park. And he told me to use a reference point, which was to look out the curb out of the rear quarter window, and to use that as my reference point. But the trouble is, I couldn't actually see the curb from the window, and I thought, well, I'm an average heighted sort of woman. I'm not an unusual shape, but so why didn't the car fit me and in the way it fitted him? So it was really wanting to think, how can I help make tech and equipment designed around people? So then I managed to get a scholarship to study ergonomics, human factors at university, and then been working in it ever since.
What a great story. And I think now more than ever, especially with the rise of artificial intelligence, etc., it is not forgetting that human element and how we can work alongside technology. That's so important, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's critical. I mean, it's very much what we are about, understanding the human, seeing things from that user-centered design point of view. It's very much the premise of human factors. So it's actually been around in thought since the Second World War, when people discovered that equipment wasn't quite designed around the people that actually needed to use it. So it's been around a long time.
Awesome. And of course, your path led you to Thales. So can you tell me a little bit more about the company, maybe the story behind it, and the problems that they set out to solve with technology too, just for anyone listening that are hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, Thales is really about building trusted technology, working in a variety of sectors like aerospace, defense, security, space, transport, really about cybersecurity and data protection, really big in those areas. And we also really want to improve technology by designing it around the user. So for efficiency and safety, but also giving the user a positive user experience. That's I guess where my discipline comes in, where human factors comes in. And in terms of cybersecurity, I saw that human factors could really help cybersecurity. I mean, I actually read this statistic that 95% of cybersecurity breaches are attributed to human error.
Yeah.
So that made me think, well, we work in human error, in human factors. We have an understanding. So I was able to kind of develop an approach and work with our cybersecurity guys to use human factors to sort of help understand human vulnerabilities in cybersecurity as well.
And I suspect that every time you see those news stories on our feeds saying that people are the weakest link in security, does it frustrate you that you still see those lazy stories again and again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose it's the way I've always been taught to think as a human factors practitioner, that don't blame the user. So it's very much about not blaming people. If we look at incident investigation, if we study incidents of cybersecurity or safety incidents, we see that most of them are actually caused by management decisions somewhere along the way, or systemic organizational failures. So just blaming people, blaming those individuals is not really going to solve the problem. We need to focus on the organizational root causes of employee behavior if we want to change that. I can give you an example if you like.
Sure.
So there was a couple of banking organizations in the UK. And a few years ago, they were attacked by a gang of cyber criminals. And what they did, they walked into high street branches, pretending to be from the bank's IT department. And the banking staff let them have access to a computer where they installed what's called a KVM switch, which allowed them remote access to the bank's computer and essentially customer data. So that kind of customer banking data. And they got a lot of customers' money, which most of it was recovered. But you got the whole reputational damage with the bank. But it shows that it doesn't matter how good your technical cybersecurity controls are. You've got to consider that human element. And I don't think you can really blame those individual staff members, because it didn't just happen in one branch, one high street branch, and it didn't just happen in one banking organization. So this to me says this is a human element consideration, really. And in that situation, you can fix it by organizational fixes like good visitor management policy, booking in the genuine IT personnel, having them wear ID, that sort of thing, giving training to staff. So it's really about making sure that we design those cybersecurity policies around the people. Otherwise you're not really capturing the full risk, I think.
And I suspect for most business leaders listening, they're all going to agree that moving away from blame culture and blaming people for poor security practices, it is something we need to do. And of course, making sure we design stuff that does consider those human factors. Are you noticing a realization in the industry that this is the thing to do, or how are you guiding them through this process?
I think people are waking up to it. They're definitely they're very interested in considering that human element.
Yeah.
I think the issue is not everyone knows quite how to do that.
Yeah.
So I think we've definitely identified an answer to that. If you're looking at human factors and using that knowledge of that understanding of human behavior, if you like, then that's really going to help address those cybersecurity issues. So I think people don't quite know how to maybe measure people, because people are less reliable, say, than a system, arguably. So, we respond differently in different scenarios. Sometimes we get tired, sometimes we're a bit emotional. We have different moods, we have different capabilities. So maybe less reliable. And I think that's maybe a harder thing to get your head around. But in human factors, that's something that's been looked at a lot. And there are tools that we use to measure and predict the likelihood of human error in a given scenario, and to mitigate it, more importantly.
So if we see the vulnerabilities in human behavior, the question's got to be, why are we not making changes, or why are businesses not making these changes? So can you expand on why companies can fit procedures around people that they have, rather than trying to change people? Because that seems to be a key element here. Definitely,
yeah. And I think ultimately, if your cybersecurity policy is too strict, then people are going to find workarounds. I'm afraid, that is just a fact. It's human nature. It's not usually malicious. It's people just trying to find the easiest way to do their job, or to in a personal situation to get around a website or something. It's so they might be tempted to bypass overly strict security in order to do that. So I think it's not about just having really strict policies. It's about really designing them around the people that have got to use them. So if people need to share information with different outside parties, then don't lock that down. Provide them a safe way of doing that, and ideally, make the safest way also the easiest way. So I think it's also a lot easier to change organizational factors than it is to change people. It's actually really hard to change people, arguably unethical. So I think it's focusing. I would focus on those organizational factors, and fit those procedures around the people that have got to use them, and you'll get much more buy-in that way as well.
And of course, awareness training is important, but more is needed. And I think we've all seen examples of, or bad examples of, compliance training where people just hit next for an hour, and then they get a nice approval next to their staff profile. But can you expand on why the technology to help them prevent errors is critical, and why we need to be doing more?
Yeah, I mean, there's a really nice quote, which I'll paraphrase, from the health and safety executive. We all make errors, regardless of how much training we've had. And I really believe that. And I think it's about, you can't just train out error. I've worked in incident investigations where people have been, blamed for the incident, and then the recommendation has been give them some training. It's really patronizing to give somebody who's got 30 years experience on the job training in how to do their job. That's not why the incident happened. It's not gonna solve the problem. But I think, if we use human factors to understand what the causes of those errors are, or what errors might occur. So, for example, considering the user's journey, their goals in using the equipment, how someone might navigate around a software system, what kind of user terminology do they use. And I think also, my bugbear is passwords. Actually, I'd love to see them completely eradicated. We've got so many in our personal, professional lives. It's just too much to remember all of them. So use of anything that can help with that. Particularly, I'd love to see more use of biometrics like facial recognition, fingerprint recognition, that sort of thing, to get around passwords, because passwords are very much reliant on a human vulnerability. So I'd love to see tech kind of help with that. I think also maybe considering some of the language that we use in security can be a bit dramatic, like if we say brute force attack, that sounds quite scary. Whereas a malware infection might sound quite tame, but that actually could be a lot more serious and damaging. So we can become desensitized by the language. It's about looking at the language that we use and thinking about what it means to the user, I think.
100% with you there. And of course, over the last couple of years, we've seen additional challenges which have emerged because of things like security of information in the home, or an expectation to work from any device on any network in any location at any time. So can you share your thoughts and insights around this and the kind of thing that may or may not be keeping you up at night on this subject?
Yeah, I mean, I think really, it's an interesting one. I mean, the pandemic kind of forced things to fast track really quickly, and I'm not sure everyone was fully prepared. But I think employers need to be providing employees with the equipment and the advice to enable them to work safely at home or remotely, wherever they're working. I would say, if you're having a teleconference or a video conference where you're sharing sensitive information, then maybe keep the kids away if you can. Even if your partner has or someone that lives in your house, if they've got a teleconference or a video conference going on themselves, then whatever you're saying could be heard by their colleagues. So it's just, I guess, being cognizant of that. And if you can, trying to have a private space where you can discuss anything sensitive. Also, maybe not having an Alexa near where you work as well. That's that's something I used to have, because it's quite nice to listen to the radio or whatever. And then I thought, actually, do I trust this device to be listening to everything that I'm saying? And I guess about printing documents, I mean, obviously it's good not to print and to avoid printing stuff. But if we have got sensitive information on hard copy, then having the equipment to shred it or to lock it away when it's not needed, using a virtual private network. So I think it's about trying to provide people with advice as well as the technology and how they should be using that technology, what level of security the technology has, and what level of information can be shared. And I think it's really about making sure that you've got the right kit and that you know how to use it.
And I was shifting uncomfortably in my chair as you were saying that, because I've got to confess here, when I'm writing, I always have 6 music playing in the background on an Amazon Alexa device to my right. So I was looking at it thinking, oh dear, I'm going to get my wrist slapped in a minute. But it is something we need to consider, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends what you're discussing. If there's something that you wouldn't want shared publicly, then it's maybe something to think about. So, yeah.
100%. And I don't want to dwell too much on the doom and gloom side of things. If we look towards the future, what makes you hopeful or even excited about the future?
I'm liking some of the developments in biometric technology. I mean, this kind of fingerprint facial recognition, you're seeing more of it on laptops, and, it used to be just on maybe smartphones. I think that's on the rise. I'd like to see more and more of it used throughout, workplaces, if we could access websites somehow by that, I think that would be terrific in the future. So as I said, I think passwords are a human vulnerability. Also seeing more of a push for UX, the user experience. So people want stuff that's designed to fit them. So that's really good. That's something I'm really passionate about as well.
Awesome. And I appreciate you probably can't share too much, but is there anything you can share around what your big focus is this year, what you're going to be working on?
I've actually just signed a book deal, so I'm really excited about that. Yeah. So that's going to be taking up a lot of my spare time this year. It's called How Organizations Can Enhance Cyber Resilience Through Human Factors. So it's literally only just started. It's only recently signed the book deal in the last couple of weeks. So it's a while off publication yet. But that's going to be my big focus, I think. Also, I think just continuing to raise awareness of human factors and the user experience and how it can benefit tech.
And for any business leader in a similar position that could be listening anywhere in the world, what kind of word count have you got ahead for, and how are you going to break that up into little pieces? Is there anything you could share around the structure, or how are you going to approach it? Because it is incredibly intimidating. I've only done one book, and I swore to myself I'd never do it again because of the early mornings and everything that you had to commit to it. But now, a few years later, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm ready again. But I'm just curious what's going through your head now and how you're going to be approaching that.
Yeah, I think the time commitment is daunting. I have managed out, planned it out, set reasonable time frames. For me, it's going to be Fridays or Friday afternoons. And my manager's been really supportive in helping me allocate a little bit of time for that, and then also using up some of my annual leave. So booking it in advance, because I think you do need to allow that quiet time really to just sit and write. So yeah, I have got it kind of planned out. So but yeah, I won't say I'm not daunted by the prospect, but we have got a cunning plan. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to get you back on the podcast later in the year or next year when the book is out, and we'll talk about that and your journey in writing it and everything that you achieved with that book. But before I let you go, there is a lot of pressure on everyone to be in a state of almost continuous learning now to keep up to speed with the changes. I mean, if we go back 3 months ago, ChatGPT wasn't a thing, and now it's all anyone's talking about. So I'm curious, how or where do you self-educate? How do you keep on top of things and the latest trends?
Yeah, I really like the CIHF webinars. That's the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors. So as I said, I'm a member, former president, but they do these free webinars quite frequently, and they've also got a great on-demand function, so you can go and check them out and look at anything that you find interesting there. So there's some great topics, robotics, autonomous systems. I also did one myself on cybersecurity as well, and human factors. So yeah. Also, I think probably from my team as well, I think, it's good to be humble and to not think you know everything as a manager. And I learn from them as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. And there are so many different URL and domain names out there at the moment. So what's the best starting point for anyone listening to find out more from your team, some of the blogs and the information that you're putting on the website at Thales, or anything we talked about today? What's the best starting point for everything?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of information, general information on the Thales UK website. You can get hold of me on LinkedIn, Twitter. If you want to know more about human factors and cybersecurity, as I did do a webinar, which is available on demand on the, if you search CIEHF, you'll be able to access that from there. So.
Oh, awesome. Well, I will also write a blog post to promote this interview. So if it's okay with you, I might attach that webinar at the bottom of the page so people can check that out and find it.
Brilliant,
nice and easy.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I love chatting with you today about cybersecurity, the blame culture, why we need to stop blaming people for poor security practices, why training's not enough, and also the additional challenges have emerged over the last couple of years. But more than anything, I think your origin story, how the worlds of tech and humans would collide for you, and how not only your work you're doing now, but also the book you're writing. So we will get you back on when that book is out there. And more than anything, though, just thanks for sitting down and sharing that with me today.
Oh, thanks so much. No, it's been a pleasure.
I cannot thank Amanda enough for coming on the podcast today. We covered so much there, and so many big takeaways about why training is not enough. People are still going to make errors no matter how much training we give them. And yes, awareness training is important, but the technology to help them prevent errors is equally as critical. And also when talking about remote environments and the additional challenges that have emerged over the last couple of years, including security of information in the home, etc. All big topics. So a big thank you to Amanda for coming on here and talking about that today. And as always, I'll put the microphone to you now. If you've got anything you'd like to share with me, whether it be insights, experiences, questions, or you'd like to join me on the show, whatever it is, please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or connect with me, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram @Neil C. Hughes. But that's it for today's episode. So just a big thank you for joining me. And until next time, don't be a stranger.